Good evening. Welcome to the Mentor Public Library's program, Your Town. We are very privileged this evening to have as our guest Eleanor Garfield. The Mentor City, 25 years ago, was formed from a village and a township, and Mrs. Garfield played a large role in doing that. In the years 1952 to 1956, she was the first woman mayor of Mentor and the only woman mayor of Mentor. And I would like to thank you for being with us. And how did you become the mayor of Mentor?
Well, I'd lived here for 20 years and nothing had been done. There were no decent street lights. You couldn't see anything. There were no paved streets except cattle. And there was no city water and obviously no industry. And I said to my father-in-law that we called Bum, Mr. Garfield. I called him Bum, but he was a very nice man. And I said to him, Bum, if something isn't done in this town, I'm going to run for mayor myself. And he said, well, my child, why don't you do it? So in 1952, I did do it. There were three candidates, George Doherty, and he got 134 votes. James Martin got 187 votes. And with some embarrassment, I say I got 535 votes. So there I was, and that was the beginning of all kinds of things. And make no mistake about it, though, Wayne Davis, God bless him, he was my solicitor, and he was a wonderful man and brilliant. And I couldn't have done it without him. And Carrie Dart, dear Carrie Dart, who was my secretary. And as a matter of fact, you know, they really ran the village. I only worked there. My first priority, obviously, was city water. We had to do something about it. And I learned a good deal about the deals that happened in government at that point in my life. They sent a lawyer from a company outside of this state. I won't tell you where, but anyway, he wasn't a salesman. He was a lawyer, as I say. And he said to me quite quietly, he said, you know, if you will cooperate with our company, I'll put you on the board, and you can come to 4 meetings a year, and we'll give you $200 a meeting. Well, he was out of that office in about 30 seconds, and that was the end of him. The office needed painting, and I said, of course, I must say that the council took an awfully dim view of a woman mayor. You have to admit that this was something unique, and they didn't think much of it. And I don't think that the village hall had been painted for 50 or 75 years. And so I asked if they would have my office painted. The office was only about 10 by 12. No, they wouldn't think of doing such a thing. All right, I said, I'll paint it myself. So I got the paint, and I was up on top of that 8-foot safe in the corner in a pair of overalls, painting into the corner when a very distinguished-looking man came in and said, may I please speak to the mayor? And my secretary said, there she is, right up there. Well, he left. That was the end of him. As you can imagine, I would think he would, wouldn't you? I had held court. I was justice of the peace as well as being the mayor, so I held court every Tuesday morning, and believe me, no one got off. My children got the message very loud and clear. However, one of my friends, I won't tell you which one, but she called me up one day and said, Elder, something terrible's happened. I got arrested. Well, I said, you just come right down here and pay your fine. And she did. And the truck drivers, I'd make them sit there for hours until we got a telegram back from their company saying they would underwrite the payment of $18. And if they were DWIs, while they were sitting there, I'd give them a yellow pad and say, now you write down, I will never drive and drink again 100 times. So I wasn't awfully popular, as you can imagine. There were a couple of stories that are sort of fun. There was a lovely old man who lived on the corner of Johnny Cake Ridge and Garfield Road. And his wife called me one day and said, Mayor, my husband hears bells ringing in the sewer. Would you please come over and see if you can tell him it isn't true? And I said, I'll be right over. So we chatted a few minutes on the porch, and then he said, there, do you hear them bells? They're down there in that sewer across the road. Do you know where that sewer is down there across the road? Yes, I said. I'll go down and we'll do something about it. He could see me as I walked down and climbed inside of the sewer. And of course there were more old bottles and garbage and rags and papers in there, and I just threw them all out into the road. Then I went back and just said, well, now you aren't going to be hearing those anymore. And he never did. The fireman's banquet was great fun. The mayor was always asked to go to the fireman's banquet, and of course I loved every minute of it. And I may say it was in January, and the weather was just colder than Billy be damned. And also a snowstorm the last year. But they said that if there was a fire during the fireman's banquet that the mayor could ride on the back of the fire department. Well, of course, I just couldn't wait. And when there wasn't a snowstorm, I was just bereft. I felt so badly. And the dear, I can't remember, I'm not quite sure what his name was now. I'm ashamed to admit. But anyway, they felt so sad that they all slid down the pole in their uniforms and got on the fire truck and put me on the back with the firemen on both sides hanging on to me. Cold, it was incredible, and snow, and they took me all the way home to my front door. So that was really great fun. And there are a lot of other stories, and I know you can't cope with it all. But of course, the most important one of all was the fact that we did get this extraordinary
Industrial Park?
Industrial Park. I have a picture here with me, which you can't see, obviously, but it's a picture of Ray Dawson and myself on our hands and knees on my living room rug with a piece of wrapping paper drawing a picture of the Industrial Park. And when it came to be, really, I think it wasn't more than 2 feet off. Well, I took it immediately, of course, to my council. Well, look, council, honestly, what a bunch of... Anyway, Glenn Austin, who was the worst of all of them, he's dead, so that's all right, he'll never hear this. But Glenn Austin said, oh, there'll never be anything down there but soybeans.
Because Mentor at that time was all farmland.
And that was true, it was all
Yes.
farmland, sure. And never be anything down there. So Ray and I just got in our car and took it into the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company in Cleveland. And they just grabbed it just quicker than a wink. And this is why we have it today, the Industrial Park, is because they took it and it's their baby, not mine. We just gave, but Ray gets the credit. It was his, really his. If it hadn't been for Ray, it never would have happened, I don't think. He was
well, in the time
very much part of it.
when you were planning this, after you basically had it planned and it had started, then they decided to build Route 2, the freeway, and it was going to divide your
That's
industrial
right.
park in
That's
half.
Right. Yes, and that I was going to have no part of.
I was sure.
And they were going to cut me right off, you know. I just wasn't going to have it happen. And so I went down to Columbus, and I said, no, you just can't do this. It's just too bad, but you just can't do that. And they didn't, of course.
No, and I had never really realized before that it bowed out, but actually it would have followed the railroad tracks if it had gone in its original plan. And it is quite a distance away from the railroad tracks when you look at between 306 and 615.
That's right. Well, I wasn't going to have any part of that, I assure you. Now, I could probably go on for a long time with all kinds of things, but I think that time is precious, and it seems to me that these are about enough on my part.
Well, one of the things...
Of course, a park, I have to say something about the park, because I do want people to know that I was undone when I discovered that it was named the Eleanor B. Garfield Park. I hadn't the faintest idea of such a thing. And of course, I was never so flattered in my life, as you can imagine.
Well, you played that particular piece of land, played quite a bit of history in your life, because I read a piece where you were with the police chief when you were mayor, when you were on a stakeout, which was then, I believe, the Newell property.
Yes.
It was a home, I would assume, a rather
John,
large
it was my
home.
uncle's home.
And
Mrs. Garfield's brother's home, John Newell.
And that there was some misdoing there, and you were on a stakeout.
I'll say there was misdoing. After Uncle John died, some woman, I don't even remember her name, and of course I wouldn't tell you if I did, but she turned it into a speakeasy, and she was having gambling in the house.
Ah.
And I discovered that, and I put a policeman in the yard at night, lying on his stomach by the drive, and took the numbers of all the cars that were coming in.
Oh.
And we got her. And then she burned the house down.
Oh, I read that the house had burned down.
Well, I'm sure she did it. No question about it.
No doubt.
Because I mean, the tables, everything was there. There she had. She just eliminated anything that could show who it was. And I don't know who she is. I don't even remember her name. So she can't. Maybe she'll sue me. If she's still living. Nobody is living. You realize that.
So you're safe then.
What?
You're safe. You don't have to worry about it then.
Well, it's really true. I really think there's only one person on my whole council that's still living. Was the treasurer.
Now, after where the new estate was, is where they built the Menor Recreation Park, which is
That's
now
right.
the Eleanor B. Garfield Park.
That's
but for
right.
a long time, it was a private recreation center.
Well, yes, we raised the money for
Yes.
it, you see. And dear Leonard Hanna said, I'll give you, Eleanor, I'll give you $100,000 $150,000 if you can raise $150,000, and we did. And then it was run that way for a long time before it was a park. And then we couldn't, with dues, you pay dues,
Yes.
you see.
Yes.
And then, of course, the city took it over eventually, which now, of course, is
The city-owned and,
publicly owned.
and
obviously.
renamed it after you.
Yes.
Well, we're going to take a short break right here, and we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the Menor Public Library's program, Your Town. Our guest this evening is Eleanor Garfield, and we have just talked about her years as mayor as the city of Menor, and she was very instrumental in things that people who live here now take for granted, such as the industrial park, our excellent recreation centers, and a lot of other things.
Consolidation.
And the consolidation of the township and the city. Now, you kind of started the bug in people's ear about that, and it took about 10 years after that for it to actually happen, and that was rather I don't know what the term is, a heated time in Mentor, because not everyone was in favor of that.
I know that. I
Why did
realize
you
that.
feel that that was important?
Well, I can think of 25 reasons, which I'm not going to give you, except that the head of the township had died in his chair 10 years before, but he was still sitting in it, you know. and so nothing got done, and it was incredible to have somebody there that just didn't have any idea of doing anything. And so I just said, this is ridiculous. We shouldn't have it this way. It all ought to be amalgamated into one thing. And I managed to talk somebody into it. I don't know how I did, but I did.
And you felt that by forming a city that everyone would benefit?
Get the consolidation going. Get away from this township idea and village idea. Well, of course, the minute it became, the township became part of the village, we turned into a little bit more than a village. We became a town by that time, you see, the minute that happened.
Yes.
You see. And then as it grew and things began, then, of course, it eventually became a city.
Now, how do you feel about the growth of Menor? I know I have lived in this area all my life, and I remember that when I was in high school, there was the big red barn across from, what is now the lake, the shopping center. And it's changed a lot even in my lifetime, and in yours you've seen so much more.
How much time have I got?
Probably about 10 minutes.
All right, now then maybe you'd be interested in this. I first came to Mentor when I was 8 years old.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. My father, who came from a little bit of a town in Indiana, when President Garfield died, he said to his mother, they didn't have any money anyway, and there were 3 boys, and he said to his mother, I'd like to go up to Cleveland for that funeral. People are coming from all around, and can I go, Mother, I think I could really find a job in Cleveland that would help out a lot. So she told him to go. So he got in a farm wagon with some people and came up to President Garfield's funeral. He never went home.
Oh, my goodness.
And he met people here and became the treasurer for the Cleveland Electric Illuminating. No, I beg your pardon. For the wait a minute. This is what's going to happen because I wasn't anticipating this, but it's the car line that runs from Cleveland to Erie, Pennsylvania. What is it called?
I don't know the name, but that's all right. Go
Well,
ahead.
anyway, and then he met people here through the Everetts and the Moores. Mr. Everett and Mr. Moore were the head of that whole car line that went, the old red car line that went right through Mentor, And as it turned out, Mrs. Everett and Mrs. Moore became friends of my mother, that my father married, and they all went to school together. So it was one of those things, you see. So I grew up with those Moore children.
I see.
And used to go out there and stay a week at a time at the Moores. Now, the reason I thought of this, and I wouldn't have, is because you talked about the mall. Well, you see, that was the Moores' front yard.
Yes, and the Moores estate is up on where Lakeland Community College is.
That's right. You see, one of the colleges. And, of course, I went there as a little girl, so I knew, but I didn't know anybody on the other side of Menor Avenue. You see, I just knew the Moores and the Everetts and the Boltons and the people up there that I'd grown up with,
Yes.
you see. Well, anyway, I can remember Mrs. Everett taking, that's the Curtain Club at the present, was the Everett's house.
Okay.
And that has a big tower at the top of the house. And I can remember Mrs. Everett taking me up there when I was about, I suppose 10. And she said, Eleanor, she said, you see that white house down there on Menor Avenue? Yes. I said, well, she said, you know, that's where President Garfield lived. Well, little did I think in another how many years I would be living there. I must say that that was quite an interesting thing to think that much later I would know that house very well.
Well, how did you meet your husband?
Well, he went to the parties in town, that were debutante parties, and you know,
The social circle.
He grew up at the same time I did, and he and Jack Newell and Harvey Brown. You know, these boys out in Menor, I knew, but I didn't know their families. I knew the boys because they went to the debutante parties and the balls and things that we grew up with. When I went to Laurel, and they went to university, and there we were, you see. So that's how I got to know them.
That's very interesting that the Garfield family has played a role in your life extensively.
Yes, for a long time.
That you brought your father to this area.
Yes, well, you asked how I happened to know about it. And
that's something
it goes back a long ways,
yes,
doesn't
it does.
Way back to 1881.
My goodness. Now, after you were mayor for 4 years.
Yes.
2
terms.
2 terms.
And then I quit while I was ahead. Believe me, I knew better than to try it again, because really, I just figured it was the thing to do.
That's a big responsibility, and you were during a time when a lot of changes were occurring.
Yes, I know, and they needed it. It was getting to be very big by that time, you know, with the consolidation and all. It was much better that I didn't run a 3rd term.
Now, after you were no longer mayor, what did you do to... I'm sure you did a lot of things. One of the things that I read about you was that you like to restore furniture. And in one of the stories, in the book that you wrote to your family when you were 70, I believe, you are...
Did you read that too? How did you get a hold of that?
That was at the History Center. But you have a large knowledge of antiques, and you only made $75 a month when you were mayor.
That's right, and they wouldn't give me any more, and no expense account either.
So you supplemented
for 4 years.
Your income by restoring
And don't forget
furniture.
that I was alone, you see. My husband had died, and I had to earn my living. And I was determined I was not going to get dressed up and go into Cleveland and get a job. I'd refinish furniture for fun, because I love it. I loved antique furniture, and I loved playing with it. And so I just put on my overalls and went out in the barn and refinished furniture and earned enough money to support the 2 boys and myself.
As well as being mayor of the city.
Yeah.
And you continued, I'm sure that your interest in furniture has continued, because I know when you when you were in Europe, you identify so many fine pieces of furniture, and I can tell your appreciation of it.
Oh, yes. I mean, that trip to Europe, that 1966 trip to Europe was really, that was a masterpiece. I had a wonderful time.
I must say, one of the things that anyone that you are, a lot of people know your name as by the park. And because, you know, people that are unfamiliar with who you are, you know, except people who have lived here for a long time.
Yeah.
But in reading about you, one of the things I must say that I've admired about you is your spirit and your total enthusiasm of people of all different ages. You love people so much that you're willing, in your tour of Europe, young, old.
Doesn't make any difference, no. My friends down there, I'm the oldest. I'm going to be 90, you know.
Yes, I know.
In March. And none of my friends are as old as I am. Only one. And she had her 90th birthday last year. The rest of them are 82, 84, 86. And I have lately had the privilege of inheriting, or whatever one does, 3 lovely friends, all in their 40s, who run the library. The Kershaw County Library, and they like old ladies. So they have just been so nice to me, and I just can't tell you how much I appreciate that. They are dear, dear people, and I see quite a lot. So you see, I have a combination of the old and the young. And then as I've got an awful lot of black friends too. By that, I don't know how to say this exactly, but well, now the other day, one of my friends, let's just let it go. But they've been awfully good to me. I think, in fact, I have a cleaning woman, and I've said to her, Eliza, if I get to the place where I can't think, now you remember, you're going to come every day. I'm not going to go to that stupid hospital up there with all those idiots in that place where they put you. I said, I'm going to stay right where I am. And Eliza, you're going to come every day and you're going to take care of me till I die. And yes, Miss Garfield, I sure will. Yes, I certainly will. Well, there we are. So I mean, I always have here too. I've known every type. And you know, when you come to think about it, men are sort of like golf, divided into three parts, or it was. I mean, there are the people on the hill, and then there are people in the village, and there are people down the other side of the tracks.
I imagine it
in a way. I don't mean that in the wrong way.
No.
Don't misunderstand me. But they were farmers down there, mostly, you see. And then the people were in the village where, well, it was a village. There were only 3 stores.
And that would be around the Center Street area in there?
Yes, on Center Street. They had a Mrs. Jackett's confectionery store and one little hardware store and a meat market. And that was it. And then up at the other end of the village, they had another drugstore, and George Briggs had a hardware store, and then around the corner was a meat market. And that was the extent of the shopping in Metter.
We've grown quite a bit since then.
You most certainly have. As a matter of fact, the last time I was here, the post office used to be behind the school, you know.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Well, I swung into the post office, and I thought it looked kind of cleaned up. But anyway, I went in, and I went to the window, and I said, I came to borrow, I'd like some stamps, please. And she looked at me as if I was out of my mind, and I said, well, I said, this is the post office, isn't it? Oh, well, she said, it's way down there someplace. But I didn't realize it. You see, everything's changed. So
I'm sure it has.
I hardly know my way around.
Did you ever imagine that when you instigated the Tyler Boulevard, the parks, and that it would grow to this enormity?
Oh, I had no idea that this would happen, really. Well, you know what it was? It was the industry coming in. We had to have industry, our schools. Nobody was paying for our schools. We just had to have industry.
So that was one of your main motivating forces.
That was the reason
for your education.
For the whole thing, was because our schools just had to have the money, and we had the Columbia Match Company.
Yes, which is now a restaurant.
Right down, well, the Columbia, that's right, the Columbia Match Company was right on the railroad track.
Yes.
And dear Jerry Osborne, dear Jerry Osborne with that company, and then the Merkles, and that was it.
Can't support schools with that well.
Beg your pardon?
You couldn't support schools with that little industry.
Very well. And we were growing, even then, we were beginning to grow. And then, of course, when the mall came in and all this kind of people just came up, I mean, it got so big that it isn't the garden center of the world anymore. It used to be, you know.
With Wyatt Roses.
That's right, and they moved.
Yes, Mr. Wyatt passed away. All of those yes, and now there are homes there.
Of course.
Yes.
They couldn't afford, the land was too expensive to grow flowers. They couldn't afford it, I don't think.
Probably.
Yeah.
No.
The whole system has changed, really.
Much, and are you pleased? This is a matter of opinion. I'm sure it's sad to see that go, though. That's an era.
I'm tickled to death that things have gone so well, obviously. I don't feel very much at home here anymore. I'm lost once I get past Center Street and Menor Avenue, you know. This whole thing down to the lake, I couldn't get to the village hall on penalty of death. I have no idea how to get there. You see, everything down there is so completely changed. Everything. The only place that's the same is the hill. And even those houses have all changed. The families have all died, and other people have gone into them. But the people up on the hill above Johnny Cake Ridge, those homes up there, even all of them have disappeared too. Nobody's alive anymore.
Well, we're glad you are. It's been, I must say that we're running out of time.
I would think you would be, and I've talked an awful lot, but that's what you asked me to do.
That's what I wanted you to do. It's been our privilege to have you as a guest.
I hope I haven't just talked too much.
No, it's quite an honor for the people of Mentor to...
It's no honor. It's
Yes,
just
it is.
It's just the fun of coming back and give them all love and kisses. They were awfully good to me, believe me. The people were awfully good to me, and I do appreciate it.
Well, you gave the city of Mentor a lot, too. I think it was an even exchange. And I'd like to thank you again.
Well,
And
I want to thank you, too, if
you're
I may.
welcome. You certainly may. And
I'm very flattered, frankly.
And I would like to thank you for watching the Mentor Public Library's program, Your Town.